Discover the most fun EDH commanders to spice up your games. From chaos to creativity, these picks guarantee unforgettable moments on the battlefield. These are our top picks for the most fun commanders. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Commander Compass. Today, we are laying down our picks for the most fun commanders to play that have graced our local game shops in recent years. This is part 2 of our series. Once again, remember, there will be no silver border cards on this list. Let's get to it. Galadriel, Light of Valinor, is a potent EDH commander, particularly in a deck focused on creature generation. Her abilities allow you to generate mana, buff your team with +1/+1 counters, and scry and draw cards, making her a versatile and powerful choice for a commander. Something many people don't realize is scry to draw a card is effectively like drawing 2 cards. You look at the top 2, those are 2 lands, send them to bottom, then you draw a card. It rifles you through your deck extremely efficiently and fast. Start throwing in cards like Illustrious Wanderglyph or Coma Cosmos Serpent into the deck, who create a 1/1 colorless gnome or a 3/3 blue serpent creature token during each of our opponent's upkeeps, providing a steady stream of creatures to trigger Galadriel's abilities. This allows us to effectively dig through 12 cards of our library every single turn rotation with just one of them on the field. Let that go on until you have the board state you need, and we'll just change up the strategy. Now, instead of digging, we're buffing our entire board, adding +4 power to our creatures every turn rotation. Throw in Hardened Scales for an extra +1, and it's not long before you just have lethal damage on your board and can start destroying people. Charismatic Conqueror is a great card that can be used in Galadriel decks, potentially generating creatures whenever creatures enter your opponent's side of the field. This includes token generators and blink effects. Granted, it's based on whether your opponents want those creatures to come in tapped or not, but it's still a win-win either way. It can provide a significant advantage in games, making it a valuable addition to the deck. For those looking more at Elf Tribal, Elvish Warmaster is an excellent card. It creates a 1 out of 1 green elf warrior creature token whenever 1 or more other elves enter the battlefield, providing additional triggers for Galadriel's abilities. Galadrim Brigade and Imperious Perfect are both elf cards that can generate additional elf tokens, further fueling Elvish Warmaster and Galadriel's abilities. Danny Pink is also insane in this deck. You just go ahead and get the 1/1 counter trigger, then you're going to draw cards equal to the amount of creatures on your battlefield, plus you can do that again on everybody's upkeep. You might want to consider throwing in a couple cards that grant infinite hand size as a precaution. Galadriel is insanely broken, so she's definitely going on our list of top fun commanders. Artificer the Strategist is an Elder Dragon commander whose unique ability proves that sometimes the best offense is a good defense. Artificer is actually one of the original 7 Elder Dragons our EDH format is named after. He is a 4-mana flying and vigilant 3/5 Bant commander who embodies Defender Tribal by making all of our Defender creatures able to deal damage with their toughness rather than their power. Normally creatures with Defender can't attack, but Artificer also removes that restriction that would prevent them from attacking. And as if that wasn't enough, whenever a Defender creature enters our battlefield, we get to draw a card. Usually, Defender is a keyword ability that says the creature can't attack. The creature in question can still block or use its abilities, but it can't go on the offensive. It's also important to note all older creatures with Wall as its creature typing now have Defender, since the cards were errataed to have the keyword in later years. The whole purpose of this deck is to turn your strong defensive line into an unexpected offensive threat, catching your opponents off guard and potentially securing those victories. This strategy focuses on overwhelming opponents with a sudden unexpected offense while maintaining strong defensive line. Artificer's decks will generally have a low mana curve, allowing us to quickly build several walls to not only block but slam into our opponents. Cards like Wall of Denial and Wall of Tanglecord have high toughness and low mana cost, making them ideal for Artificer's ability. For only 3 mana while Artificer is on the field, Wall of Denial gives you an 8/8 flying creature with Shroud. And for only 2 mana, Wall of Tanglecord becomes a 6/6 that can block flyers if needed. These cards provide a strong defensive line while also enabling your offense, which is essential for the deck's strategy. Axebane Guardian and Overgrown Battlement are excellent for ramp and mana generation in an Arcades deck. They are Gaia's Cradle for defenders, as their abilities to generate additional mana based on the number of defenders you control can help you cast more of your low-cost creatures and other spells more easily, while Arcades replenishes your hand as you cast them. And if our mana curve wasn't cheap enough, Sunscape Familiar reduces the cost of all your green and blue spells by 1 colorless. Crashing Drawbridge taps to give all our freshly summoned creatures haste. High Alert is the enchantment version of our commander, which ensures your defenders can still attack using their toughness. However, be aware of variant like Razad Yan Bashir and Belligerent Brontodon, who, despite swapping our power, do not remove the defender ability which prevents us from attacking. Tetsuko Umezawa, Fugitive, makes your 1 or below powered creatures unblockable. Remember, almost every defender in the game normally has 0 power when they initially declare their attack. Combat damage is assigned at a later step, meaning when we initially declare our attacks with Tetsuko on the field, she ensures our creatures get to our opponents unopposed. With Arcades or High Alert is on the battlefield, your opponents will be taking our toughness as direct damage. This provides an alternative way to capitalize on your defenders and pressure your opponents. For only 2 mana, Wall of Junk becomes a 7/7 that returns to our hand after combat if it gets blocked, ensuring we either do a lot of damage or have repeated card draw every time we cast it. Need to clear the battlefield? Slaughter the Strong is a low-cost 3 mana board wipe that lets each player select which creatures they want to keep as long as the total power of the selected creatures is below 4. Arcades counts as 3, but you can add as many 0-powered creatures as you like, and you still have room for Tetsuko, or any other 1-power creature you may have, allowing you to keep most if not all of your team while wiping away everyone else's board state. Follow that up with a high-toughness assault on whatever your opponents have left over, and someone is usually bound to go down. Arcades the Strategist brings a refreshing twist to your table by showcasing the potent synergy of offense and defense. With very budget-friendly deck options and its low mana curve, this deck excels at surprising opponents with a sudden and powerful assault, filling every game with unexpected surprises. It's a blast to pilot and bound to leave some lasting impressions on your playgroup. Now it's time to delve into the depths of Dimir-colored nightmares alongside Captain Engathrod. This cunning horror commander orchestrating a menacing symphony of mill and thievery as he sails the seas on a ship you Pirates of the Caribbean fans will all agree is the Flying Dutchman. As your commander, Captain Engathrod will grant all your horror-typed creatures the Menace ability. Additionally, whenever a horror you control deals combat damage to a player, that player mills that many cards. Captain Engathrod also has an ability that allows you to choose a target artifact or creature card in an opponent's graveyard that was put there from their library this turn and put it onto the battlefield under your control. While that might not seem like much at first, the captain's crew is what really makes this ability shine. Crewmates like Nemesis of Reason, the player whom it attacks must mill 10 cards. This gives Captain Engathrod even more options to choose from for its resurrection ability. Consuming Aberration's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards. Whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land card, then puts those cards into their graveyard. Guiltfeeder is a 0/4 horror creature with the Fear ability, which means it can't be blocked except by black or artifact creatures. This fear helps it achieve its true purpose. Whenever Guiltfeeder attacks and isn't blocked, the defending player loses 1 life for each card in their graveyard. Pair this with the menace provided by Engathrod, and those graveyards become a savage threat. Combine this or any of the horror creatures here with Mind Crank. Whenever an opponent loses life, that player mills that many cards. This card serves as a potent weapon in our arsenal, making it difficult for opponents to stay alive. It's also a very popular combo piece with cards like Seer Conrad, who continually damage your opponent whenever creatures get put in or taken out of the graveyard. Zealous Sanity Flayer has an ability that allows you to tap it and force target player to mill 3 cards. Similarly to Seer Conrad, it also benefits from creatures hitting the graveyard by a mill, as whenever one does you create a 1/1 black horror creature token. Need a way to keep your opponent's commanders and problematic creatures in check? Whenever Sludge Monster enters the battlefield or attacks, put a slime counter on up to 1 other target creature. Non-horror creatures with slime counters on them lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 2/2. While most players might be used to equipment cards that remove abilities, counters can be a lot harder to deal with, usually resulting in self-sacrifices. Fractured Sanity is a sorcery that makes each opponent mill 14 cards. If 3 blue mana is too expensive, it also has a cycling ability that allows you to discard it and draw a card for a 1 and a blue. When you cycle Fractured Sanity, each opponent mills 4 cards instead. And finally, Spellskite. This horror artifact creature can be used to protect Captain Engathrod from targeted removal spells. When an opponent targets Captain Engathrod with a spell or ability, you can pay 2 life or a blue to redirect it to Spellskite instead. This makes it more difficult for opponents to deal with your commander through targeted removal spells. The basic strategy is to get Captain Engathrod on the board as quickly as possible and mill your opponents of everything they have. Salvage what you can from their graveyards, all while slaughtering them with a monstrous of Lovecraftian horrors. With so many terrifying tactics at your disposal, your opponent will wince with fear the moment this deck slams onto the table. Now, let me introduce you to Urza Chief Artificer. He is a 3 white blue black 4/5 Esper colored commander with an affinity for artifact creatures, meaning he cost 1 generic mana less to cast for each artifact creature you have out on the board. This also includes the commander tax, so with enough artifact creatures out, you can just keep recasting him for blue white black. He also grants those artifact creatures menace, which in itself is amazing. However, the ability most players focus on is his end step ability, where he whips up a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token, and get this, it gains additional power and toughness for every artifact you've got in your arsenal. Basically, he's conjuring these massive constructs that turn into behemoths with each artifact on the field. Obviously, we're gearing up to flood the battlefield with a ton of artifacts, but how each artifact adds to the battle is where things really get fun. Mechanic-wise, Artificer-crafted creatures often benefit from power boosts generated by the presence of the other artifacts and creatures around them. Digsite Engineer lets you create more constructs whenever you cast an artifact. Thopter Spy Network creates Thopters at every upkeep, provided you have artifacts, and every time one of our artifact creatures does combat damage we get to draw. Thousand Moon Smithy enters, creating a white gnome soldier artifact whose power and toughness are equal to not just how many artifacts you control, but also creatures. Tap 5 artifacts to transform it into the amazing Barracks of the Thousand, which will create more of these gnome soldiers whenever it's tapped for mana to cast other artifacts or creatures. Encroaching Mycosynth and Mycosynth Lattice turn everything you have into artifacts, including the cards in our hands, decks, and commander zone. But can you think of a way we can use to take advantage of that? Let's meet the artifact economist, Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge. This planeswalker's static ability is my favorite thing about him. Creatures and planeswalkers that you cast also gain an affinity for artifacts. Meaning with him out on the field, he'll make every artifact that you want to cast 1 generic mana less by how many artifacts you already control on the field. Things get really cheap really fast. His +2 loyalty ability deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of artifacts you control and you gain X life. His -3 lets you bring an artifact from your graveyard back to your hand. And his ultimate ability exiles the top 10 cards of your library and puts all artifact cards from among them onto the field. Personally, the main focus for Tezzeret is his static and his ping ability. The Immortal Sun is an amazing legendary artifact that adds a lot of versatility to our deck. Not only does it let us draw extra cards, but it also boosts our creatures with its +1/+1 Anthem effect and reduces the cost of our spells by 1. While preventing the activation of Planeswalker loyalty abilities might sound like a double-edged sword, it doesn't diminish the power of Tezzeret's cost reduction ability, which is the key feature we truly appreciate. Additionally, Foundry Inspector and Ethereum Sculptor reduce the cost of casting our artifact spells by 1. Cranial Plating is another really good equipment. The equipped creature gains additional power for each artifact you control. Then you can pay 2 black to attach Cranial Plating to another target creature at instant speed. Move it over mid-battle to another creature just before the damage step to really irk your opponents. Emry Lurker of the Loch is a great way to recover lost artifacts. This Arthurian-inspired card is typically a staple among most artifact-centric decks. Bronze Guardians comes in with double strike and grants all our other artifacts Ward 2. Its power is equal to how many artifacts we control. And if Ward 2 isn't enough, Padim Console of Innovation is even better yet, giving all our artifacts hexproof, plus it lets us draw at our upkeep if we control the artifact with the highest mana value on the battlefield. The One Ring is indestructible and allows us to draw cards based on the increasing amount of burden counters we gain every time we use it. Combine that with Urza Prince of Krug, who increases the power and toughness of all our artifact creatures by 2 and lets you make copies of your artifacts that also become creatures. Bet Sauron wished he could have a hexproof indestructible army of rings-based soldiers. Or better yet, let's delve into the Doctor Who universe and summon a squadron of Cybermen. This squadron grants non-legendary artifact creatures you control Myriad. As you probably already know, whenever a creature with Myriad attacks, it generates token copies of itself for each other opponent, which are exiled at the end of combat. What you might not know is if a creature has multiple instances of Myriad, each will trigger separately. So while one squadron is bad enough for your opponents, making copies of it will potentially grant your artifact creatures the power to end the game. It's easy to see why Urza is widely regarded as the chief artificer of the Magic universe. His deck showcases a synergy of powerful constructs and artifacts, promising an exciting and strategic gameplay that's sure to steal the show. And there you have it. We've delved into the enchanting realms of Galadriel, fortified our defenses with Arcades, unleashed the chaos with Captain Angathrod, and embarked on an artifact extravaganza with Urza, Chief Artificer. But hey, this is just the beginning. There's a whole galaxy of commanders waiting to be explored in future episodes. So, don't forget to smash that like button if you've had as much fun as we did. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite commander or any epic plays you pulled off with these legends. And hey, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because you don't want to miss the next installment of the most fun commanders in Magic the Gathering. We've got more epic spells, crazy combos, and unexpected shenanigans on the horizon. Until then, keep shuffling, keep slinging, and may your top decks always be legendary. See you in the next episode.